Electronic media, late-breaking news was communicated by street corner vendors holding freshly printed stacks of late edition papers, shouting, "Extra, extra, read all about it." Yet in the time it took to prepare and print the special edition, the story was often dated before it ever hit the streets. But with the advent of radio and then television, breaking news could be flashed instantly into our homes, offices, and automobiles. Late editions gave way to bulletins, and shouts of "extra, extra" were replaced by a phrase that has come to command our immediate attention. It's a phrase so powerful that Orson Welles used it to make his famous War of the Worlds broadcast absolutely believable. It's a phrase that evokes a few heart-stopping seconds of anxiety between the interruption and the actual announcement of what has happened. It's a phrase that puts us in the moment. We brace ourselves as we wait to hear the news that follows those four chilling words. We interrupt this broadcast.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast. The German news agency...
We interrupt this program to bring you a news bulletin from Washington. The White House has just announced...
Here is a news bulletin. Shots have reportedly been fired.
Here's another late development, and this news keeps coming in.
This is an NBC News hotline report.
Special report. Verdict sparks violence. National Guard troops are standing...
We interrupt this broadcast is a time capsule of the famous and infamous moments that stopped us in our tracks, combining the sounds and images of nearly a century with the emotional experience each of us has personally associated with these moments. Sudden catastrophes, a victorious end to a world war, senseless acts of terrorism, cold-blooded assassinations, and triumphant achievements of the human spirit. Ever-advancing technology and the emergence of the 24-hour news networks has created an insatiable appetite for news. The consequence is a considerable broadening of what constitutes a real news event and spawning a new genre of broadcast journalism. The rise of Elvis Presley in the 50s might have seemed, on the surface, to have more to do with sex than with music. He came to prominence at a moment when teenagers were growing in numbers and wielding economic clout, while technology made possible the mass medium in which his music could flourish. Transistor radios, portable record players, and, of course, television, where his good looks dazzled perhaps more than his voice. Elvis himself had no conscious political agenda, but he was altering the social consciousness of a generation by turning them on to the power and allure of music, which had sprung directly from black culture, and young white teenagers lapped it up. Elvis would put together a string of hit records in the late 50s, followed by over 30 motion pictures. But by the 60s and 70s, he was overshadowed by more flamboyant and daring musical performers in the evolving musical culture. By August 16, 1977, he seemed more like an afterthought than a revolutionary figure, a man whose legend seemed much older than his 42 years.
Elvis Presley, dead at the age of 42. I'm John Meyer. Elvis Presley died today at Baptist Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. Presley was 42 years old. He parlayed a $4 visit to a recording studio into a multi-million-dollar career. He was rushed to the hospital late this afternoon, suffering from what officials say was respiratory distress. The county medical examiner in Memphis, Dr. Jerry Francisca, says
the cause of the cardiac arrhythmia is not known at present time. It may never be known because there are several possible causes for cardiac arrhythmia, including high blood pressure and coronary artery disease, and he had both of those diseases. So either or both acting together might have been responsible.
Here in Washington, the White House issued a statement on the death of Presley. A report from Mutual News correspondent Duff Thomas.
In that statement, the president said Presley's music and personality, fusing the styles of white country and black rhythm and blues, permanently changed the face of American popular culture. He was a symbol to the people of the world over of the vitality, rebelliousness, and good humor of his country, unquote. The White House has no plans at this time for a day of national mourning. However, there's speculation that Presley's memory may someday be honored with a civilian medal for contributions to entertainment. Duff Thomas, the White House.
You're listening to The World Today.
News of Elvis's death flashed around the world that afternoon. Yet on the CBS Evening News that night, it was reported after 5 other stories. But as crowds began to swell into the thousands outside the gates of his Graceland home in Memphis, another chapter of Elvis mania began to emerge. Elvis Presley remains an American legend whose myth refuses to fade. Few before him, and even fewer after, would so eloquently voice the social concerns of his generation. Through his lyrics and peace-loving activism, John Lennon became more than a mere entertainer. He became an icon, a cult figure whose fans hung on his every word. The music of Lennon and his famed Beatles would form the soundtrack to a cultural revolution throughout the 60s. After the band's breakup in 1970, Lennon remained in the public eye as a successful solo act and vocal social activist, before finally retreating to his quiet life as a house husband in 1975. But in 1980, he would reemerge with a new album and a new passion for recording. He was returning from the studio when the unthinkable happened.
John Lennon was brought to the emergency room shortly before 11 p.m. He was dead on arrival.
Dr. Stephen Lynn of New York City's Roosevelt Hospital making the announcement that musician, composer, and former Beatle John Lennon is dead. Lennon was shot to death outside his New York apartment around 11 o'clock Eastern Time.
There were numerous wounds that entered the heart and the large vessels within the chest, causing a massive blood loss that could not be repaired or restored.
Dr. Lynn says Lennon suffered at least 7 gunshot wounds. Lennon was ambushed as he and his wife Yoko Ono were returning home from a recording session, allegedly by Hawaii native David Chapman.
Mr. Chapman came up behind him and called to him, Mr. Lennon, as he arrived at that doorway. And then in a combat stance, he emptied the Charter Arms .38 caliber gun that he had with him and shot John Lennon.
As news of John Lennon's murder broke, airwaves around the world were filled with his music. Millions of Americans were seated comfortably in front of their televisions watching the New England Patriots battle the Miami Dolphins on ABC Television's Monday Night Football, when commentator Howard Cosell interrupted the play-by-play with the tragic news.
In case the folks missed the earlier news flash, ABC News has confirmed that John Lennon, a member of the famed Beatles, maybe the best-known member, was shot twice in the back outside of his apartment building in the west side of New York tonight, rushed to the Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival. An unspeakable tragedy. Details on Nightline 30 minutes after the end of this contest.
Lennon was fatally shot by a disturbed fan named Mark David Chapman, who just hours before had received Lennon's autograph on an album cover. The assassination had the style and twisted motive of a political assassination, and to his millions of fans, the impact felt the same. But this time the target was not a powerful policymaker, but a simple musician with a yearning for peace. In a previous age, public leaders were cultivated from traditional fields of law and politics, science and religion. But the modern media age has blurred the lines between leaders and celebrities, as movie stars and athletes vie for public attention with popes and presidents. Perhaps no figure transcended those distinctions so dramatically as Marilyn Monroe, the greatest movie star of her time. and one whose romances linked her with her era's most acclaimed athlete, playwright, and politician. Monroe was a splendid comic actress with an uncanny skill for projecting her own form of truth onto a movie screen. To her third husband, the playwright Arthur Miller, she was champagne on the screen. But off the screen, Marilyn was a mess. Despite her own effortless luminosity, she sought refuge in the reflections of others, leading to unsuccessful marriages with Miller and with baseball star Joe DiMaggio, and rumors of an affair with President John F. Kennedy. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died alone in her apartment from an overdose of sleeping pills.
Hollywood itself, stricken by the loss of its golden goddess, was often pointed out as the villain of the piece today, as from all over the world came comment and speculation as to how and why Marilyn Monroe died. One of her co-workers was the director-producer John Huston, last to pilot her through a film, The Misfits, and in London today, John Huston said,
"A number of those who were close to her during the making of The Misfits thought it would be only a few short years before she died or went into an institution. Her great enemy was sleeplessness. Only God knows why she feared it so much. Perhaps it was simply that not to sleep meant losing her beauty, but I'm inclined to think that there was more to it than that. In any case, she fought her enemy, consciousness, with sedatives, until she'd achieve not only sleep, but insensibility. Then stimulants would be employed to awaken her. This vicious circle played such havoc with her body that she had to be hospitalized for 10 days in the middle of the picture. An overdose of sleeping tablets has become synonymous with suicide. In Marilyn's case, I think, was simply an overdose of sleeping tablets. It's a terrible pity that so much beauty has been lost to us."
In the decades following Marilyn Monroe's death, the darker circumstances of her life have become familiar tabloid fodder. Yet, strangely, those revelations have served to cast her image ever more sympathetically in our collective memory. Perhaps Marilyn Monroe's sheer translucence, her tragic lack of self-regard, has turned out to be the strongest shield of all. Ever since the end of World War II had left the U.S. and the Soviet Union as the world's dominant superpowers, relations between the rival governments had become increasingly tense. In August of 1961, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev had overseen the construction of the Berlin Wall, literally dividing Germany's great city into opposing encampments. That same year, U.S. President John F. Kennedy oversaw a calamitous attempt to overthrow the communist government of Cuba by military force. Sensing Kennedy's weakness and inexperience, and angry that the U.S. had set up a military base in Turkey with the capacity to launch missiles deep inside the Soviet Union, Khrushchev began sending military advisors and missiles to Cuba. For Kennedy, such actions posed an intolerable breach of national security. He immediately instituted a military blockade of naval shipments to Cuba, and for 1 week in October, the Earth stood still, poised on the brink of nuclear annihilation. President Kennedy alerted the nation to the crisis in a televised speech on October 22, 1962.
Live from the White House in Washington, the Mutual Broadcasting System brings you an address by President John F. Kennedy. All during the weekend, there has been an atmosphere of crisis here in Washington. Congressional leaders met with the President at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Now, with the report to the people, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. The characteristic of these new missile sites indicate two distinct types of installations. Several of them include medium-range ballistic missiles capable of carrying a nuclear warhead for a distance of more than 1,000 nautical miles. Each of these missiles, in short, is capable of striking Washington, D.C., the Panama Canal, Cape Canaveral, Mexico City, or any other city in the southeastern part of the United States. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. I have directed the continued and increased close surveillance of Cuba and its military buildup. Should these offensive military preparations continue, thus increasing the threat to the hemisphere, further action will be justified. I have directed the armed forces to prepare for any eventualities. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. Finally, I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations. I call upon him further to abandon this course of world domination and to join in an historic effort to end the perilous arms race and to transform the history of man.
Having made his stand public on national television, there could be no turning back. The two nuclear superpowers and their leaders stood eyeball to eyeball. Finally, Khrushchev agreed to turn back the Soviet ships in exchange for a promise that the U.S. would not invade Cuba without provocation. Yet that frighteningly close brush with nuclear holocaust had an elevating effect as well. At the moment of truth for the U.S. and the Soviet Union, each side realized that the other preferred a peaceful coexistence to risking mutual annihilation. Although there would be no shortage of conflicts over the next 3 decades, never again would the world be positioned so delicately on the eve of total destruction. He was the youngest man ever elected president, and his youthful exuberance gave the nation a contagious spirit of freshness and vitality. From the moment he delivered his stirring inaugural address on a bright, cold January day in 1961, John F. Kennedy became an icon in the romantic imagination of the American people. He was a man in the prime of life when he traveled to Dallas, Texas in November 1963 on a routine political fence-mending mission to help shore up his chances for re-election as president the following year. At about 12:30 on the afternoon of November 22nd, he was riding in an open convertible with his wife through downtown Dallas, waving to cheering crowds, when the unthinkable occurred, an unforgettable event that would haunt and define the turbulent decade to come.
Here's another late development, and this news keeps coming in as we're talking here. President Kennedy, according to the Associated Press, and Texas Governor John Connally were shot from ambush today in Dallas, Texas, and it is not known whether either Mr. Kennedy or Governor Connally were killed. Both Mrs. Kennedy...
We're canceling all regular formats during this emergency. All regular formats canceled. We'll continue to bring you news and bulletins. No commercial formats.
Here's other information just in from the correspondents traveling with the presidential party. It says President Kennedy apparently was shot in the head. The president...
An important bulletin. President Kennedy was given blood transfusions just a few moments ago at Parkland Hospital in an effort to save his life.
While most Americans were not at home in front of their televisions that fateful Friday afternoon, CBS newsman Walter Cronkite earned his place in television history with a broadcast interruption that has become inextricably attached to the memory of that horrible event. At 2:38 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, his voice cracking, he delivered the shocking news.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital.
John F. Kennedy was mortally wounded by shots fired from a high-powered rifle. He died within an hour. Over the course of the next 4 days, network television made the unprecedented decision to suspend all other programming to inform and unite a nation in its collective mourning.
Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy and her daughter, Caroline, are now going forward to the casket. Some people are in tears.
When John Kennedy died, the optimistic spirit of the new frontier seemed to perish with him. But the turmoil, which would mark the rest of the 60s decade, had only just begun. Pandemonium reigned in downtown Dallas on the afternoon of November 22, 1963. An assassin's bullet had murdered the people's president, John F. Kennedy, who only moments before had been waving to crowds from an open motorcade as he made his way through Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. Within an hour, police had arrested their lead suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine and accomplished sharpshooter. From the moment he was arrested, Oswald became a figure of international notoriety. For the next 2 days, hundreds of reporters and photographers descended on police headquarters in Dallas to catch a glimpse of the accused assassin.
At a press conference moments ago, Dallas Police Chief Jess Curry indicated that the suspected assassin of President Kennedy would be moved to Dallas County Jail shortly. He indicated privately to this reporter that he was trying to arrange for an armored truck to take the assassin the 15 blocks to Dallas County Jail. He admitted that several threatening phone calls had been received saying that they would never get Lee Oswald to county jail alive. Therefore, the arrangements for the armored truck are now being made.
Inexperienced at dealing with the horde of news media, Dallas Police Headquarters was a chaotic scene with unusually lax security measures. On Sunday morning, November 24th, with TV cameras in place, Oswald was led through the department's basement for transport to the county jail. And for the first time, the nation watched a national news event as it happened.
The report from Dallas, Texas. The accused assassin of President Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, was shot today just after leaving the police booking office in the Dallas City Hall. Eyewitnesses say the bullet entered Oswald's side, that he was bleeding profusely immediately after the shot. Police rushed a suspect, an elderly man, from the basement of the City Hall upstairs. Oswald was immediately placed on a stretcher and then removed from the City Hall in a police ambulance. He is now on his way to the hospital. Oswald was blanked by a heavy guard of detectives, but the shot got through to him anyway. He was holding his left side. Apparently that is where the bullet entered. Now, another report on the suspect picked up. The eyewitness on the scene said that a small man in a brown felt hat was the man who shot at Oswald, and only one shot was fired. Now, this has been a news bulletin from the Mutual Newsroom in New York City. Stay tuned to Mutual.
This is Bob Jett, WRR Mutual News, Dallas, Texas. We have just received a confirmed report from Parkland Hospital that Lee Harvey Oswald has died. Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who assassinated President Kennedy on Friday, is dead. This is a confirmed report from Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Bob Jett, Mutual News, Dallas, reporting.
The nation was stunned by a second assassination in 2 days. This time, the spectacle was broadcast live on national television. Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner and friend of local police, had slipped into the police department basement that morning and shot Oswald in front of dozens of news reporters and photographers. But instead of bringing emotional closure to the JFK assassination with his eye-for-an-eye murder of the lead suspect, Ruby's act only served to widen the web of uncertain facts and motives surrounding that tragic event, suffusing it with an aura of suspicion and mystery which lingers to this day. He became president through a cruel twist of fate, a man forced to replace a myth. No less than 1 year later, he was elected president on his own in a landslide, and followed it up by signing into law the most sweeping program of social legislation since Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Yet Lyndon Baines Johnson may be best remembered as the president who presided over the darkest days of the Vietnam War, a conflict which tore apart generations, political parties, and finally, his own ability to govern. The critical troop buildup followed the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August of 1964, in which U.S. ships were allegedly attacked in international waters by North Vietnamese gunboats. In response, Congress passed a resolution which gave President Johnson full authority to wage war as his administration determined. Within 4 years, U.S. troop levels swelled to over 500,000 soldiers. But as the war widened, Americans watched its horrors unfold on TV screens in their living rooms. In 1968, CBS newsman Walter Cronkite went to Vietnam and reported back that the war did not appear to be either as noble in its aims or as winnable in its purpose as its proponents had consistently claimed. When Johnson saw Cronkite's report, he told his aides, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost the American people." He was right. Slowly but surely, discomfort with the war turned to passionate opposition and dissent. By early 1968, Johnson's own party was splitting at the seams. Senators Eugene McCarthy and Robert Kennedy openly challenged Johnson for the Democratic presidential nomination.
Tonight I want to speak to you of peace in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. No other question so preoccupies our people.
On March 31st, 1968, in a televised appearance that was billed as an address to the nation on the war in Vietnam, Johnson revealed his own startling intentions.
What we won when all of our people united just must not now be lost in suspicion and distrust and selfishness and politics among any of our people. And believing this as I do, I have concluded that I should not permit the presidency to become involved in the partisan divisions that are developing in this political year. With America's sons in the field far away, with America's future under challenge right here at home, with our hopes and the world's hopes for peace and the balance every day, I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office, the presidency of your country. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president. But let men everywhere know, however, that a strong and a confident and a vigilant America stands ready tonight to seek an honorable peace and stands ready tonight to defend an honored cause, whatever the price, whatever the burden, whatever the sacrifice that duty may require. Thank you for listening. Good night, and God bless all of you.
You have just heard an address from the President of the United States speaking from the Oval Room at the White House.
Johnson's announcement shocked supporters and opponents alike, and his decision was hotly debated on radio and television following his appearance. In his final months in office, Johnson was able to set in motion the first official peace talks between the governments of North and South Vietnam. But his impressive record of domestic achievements would always remain shadowed by the war which had ripped apart the country. and destroyed his presidency, and a conflict which would continue to bedevil his successors in that office for 7 more years. The United States was a country founded in slavery, and one which, 100 years after slavery's official dissolution, remained half equal and half free. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was a pacifist, a Baptist minister, a spiritual man with a dream to eradicate injustice, and a brilliant tactician with a plan to make that dream come true. It was a plan which called for non-violent but unremitting resistance to racial discrimination in all its sanctioned forms. And it worked. Dr. King commanded respect and attention for a civil rights movement whose time was long overdue. He rallied support for the cause through masterful oratory and personal charisma. But mostly he did it through shining example, absorbing physical beatings, jail terms, and scathing criticism from enemies and supporters alike, without ever veering from his path. It was a path that led him to such ordinary outposts as Memphis, Tennessee, where he journeyed in April 1968 to lend support for a strike by that city's sanitation workers. It was there, standing on the balcony outside his room at the Lorraine Motel in the dimming sunlight that afternoon, that the 39-year-old Nobel Peace Prize winner made one final sacrifice for his cause.
This is an NBC News Hotline special report. Here is Don Hickman in Memphis.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot outside a Memphis motel this afternoon. His condition is not known at this time. Police put out a wanted bulletin for, quote, a young white male, well-dressed, who was seen running from a brick building across the street from the Lorraine Hotel. Police said the assailant apparently jumped into a late model white car after the shooting and sped away.
Repeating that bulletin, Dr. Martin Luther King was shot outside a Memphis hotel this evening. His condition not immediately known, but he was taken to a hospital. Lou Wood, NBC News, New York.
Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was killed by a rifle bullet fired from a flophouse across the street by a drifter with a criminal record named James Earl Ray. News of his death sent shockwaves across the country as millions expressed their sorrow and grief, some quietly, others in a violent rage.
I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King.
That night, President Lyndon Johnson addressed the nation to plead with outraged citizens to stay calm.
I know that every American of goodwill joins me in mourning the death of this outstanding leader and in praying for peace and understanding throughout this land.
Though Dr. King's aims of racial harmony and economic justice remain far from settled, his personal legacy remains an inspiration to millions of others. Through their efforts, his dreams refuse to die. In the most tumultuous year of the most tumultuous decade, Robert Kennedy emerged as a symbol of dreams reborn. While he spent most of his adult life in the shadow of his older brother, President John F. Kennedy, Robert became the natural inheritor of the Kennedy mantle following his brother's assassination in 1963. And he made the most of it, first winning election as a senator from New York in 1966, and then vying for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination in 1968. Although he was pitted against formidable opponents, including Vice President Hubert Humphrey and Senator Eugene McCarthy, Kennedy squeaked out a victory in the June 4th winner-take-all California primary. Now the party's nomination for president seemed well within his reach.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you.
Moments after his victory speech at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles that night, Robert Kennedy kept his own tragic rendezvous with destiny. Accompanying him from the podium was reporter Andrew West.
Senator, how are you going to counter Mr. Humphreys in his backgrounding you as far as the delegate votes go?
You can just go and start your struggle for it.
Senator Kennedy has been shot. Is that possible? Is that possible? Is it possible, ladies and gentlemen? It is possible. He has not only Senator Kennedy. Oh my God, Senator Kennedy has been shot, and another man, a Kennedy campaign manager, and possibly shot in the head. I am right here. Rayford Johnson has a hold of a man who apparently has fired the shot. He has fired the shot. He still has the gun. The gun is pointed at me right at this moment. Take a hold of his thumb and break it if you have to. Get his thumb.
This is NBC News with a special report from Los Angeles. A statement is now being made at the hospital in Los Angeles. Here is Ray James, NBC News at Good Samaritan Hospital.
A.M. today, the press secretary, the press aide for Senator Robert Kennedy has just arrived here at the press headquarters of the hospital. Let's go to the podium and pick up his statement.
At the time of his death were his wife, Ethel, brother-in-law, Mr. Stephen Smith, the sister-in-law, Mrs. John F. Kennedy. He was 42 years old.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Very quick, short announcement on the fact that at 1:40 this morning, Robert Kennedy died here at the hospital. This is Ray James, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Robert Kennedy was shot 3 times at close range and died from his injuries several hours later. 24-year-old Jordanian immigrant Sirhan Sirhan was the gunman, apparently angry at Kennedy's strong support of Israel's military policy. With Robert Kennedy gone, the fragile bonds still holding the Democratic Party together ripped apart. That summer, the party's convention took on the cast of a civil war. Police ran riot in the streets, attacking anti-war demonstrators, while havoc reigned on the convention floor, and TV cameras captured it all. By the time it was over, Robert Kennedy's dreams of unity were up in smoke and tear gas, and Richard Nixon was on his way to the White House. It was the finale to a decade of turbulence and upheaval. But this time, it was an event through which a nation could put aside its differences and stand together to marvel at the achievement. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy had pledged that before the 60s were over, an American would walk on the moon.
Eagle looking great. Your go.
On July 20th, 1969, hundreds of millions of people around the world watched that dream come true. 3 American astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, had helped to navigate a spaceship 240,000 miles from Earth to the moon.
Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Mode control both auto. Descent engine command override off. You're off. Engine arm off. 413 is in. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, the Eagle has landed.
At 10:56 p.m. Eastern Time, Neil Armstrong descended from the space capsule and set foot on an airless, lifeless surface where no man had ever walked before.
I'm going to step off the limb now. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Anchoring the coverage of the Apollo 11 mission for CBS was Walter Cronkite, the journalist the New York Times later called a one-man phenomenon in space coverage. But after 17 straight hours on the air, even Cronkite struggled to find the words to describe the extraordinary sight he was witnessing.
Oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute. After arm on, take care of the descent.
Wally, say something. I'm speechless. I'm just trying to hold on to my breath. That is really something.
4 days later, completing a journey of extraordinary precision and magnitude, the capsule carrying the 3 astronauts fell safely back into the pull of Earth's gravity, where they were treated as conquering heroes. A global salute led by President Richard Nixon.
I
I was thinking, as you know, as you came down, and we knew it was a success, and it had only been 8 days, just a week, a long week, that this is the greatest week in the history of the world since the creation. Because as a result of what happened in this week, the world is bigger infinitely. And also, as I'm going to find on this trip around the world, and as Secretary Rogers will find that he covers the other countries in Asia, as a result of what you've done, the world's never been closer together before. And we just thank you for that.
Theirs was the first successful trip to the moon and back. And there would be 5 more Apollo lunar missions to follow. Manned missions into space tread a perilous line between mastery and misfortune. And the Apollo 13 mission had plenty of both.
T-minus 25 seconds and counting, and Apollo 13 is go.
It began on April 11th, 1970, as the third trip to the moon in less than a year. And its launch was accompanied by all the confidence and expectations of success that the 2 previous missions had engendered.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
But as the crew circled the moon and prepared for a landing on the lunar surface 2 days later, events went terribly wrong. An oxygen tank blew up and another failed. The command module's supply of electricity, light, and water was lost, along with 2 of the spacecraft's 3 fuel cells. Suddenly, 200,000 miles from home, the Apollo 13 crew was in mortal danger.
Cities of the world woke up today to potential tragedy in outer space. NASA spokesman Glenn Lunny did his best to explain at today's Houston news conference.
At about 55 hours and 54 minutes, tank 2, cryogenic oxygen, was fine. Within less than 1 minute, the pressure in that tank had gone to 0. At the same time, fuel cell 3 went down and the main bus B went down. Of all the times on the way out to the moon, this is probably the most difficult time for a problem like this to occur. Quickly, it became clear to us after we had time to review it that the course of action was to retain the lunar module and to swing on around the moon and to prepare to do a maneuver which would in effect shorten the return time back to the Earth.
Now a real-life televised drama took place as the ground controllers in Houston improvised procedures to bring the crew home safely. The astronauts ate sparingly to save water, traveled in near-freezing cold without sleep to save energy, and manually guided their craft into position to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere without burning up.
Apollo 13, this is recovery, over.
After a few heart-stopping minutes during re-entry, when communication was interrupted and the fate of the astronauts unknown, Apollo 13 miraculously glided to the most accurate landing in the history of the Apollo flight program.
Recovery, I have astronaut Hayes aboard. His condition is excellent.
Astronauts James Lovell, Fred Hayes, and John Swigert emerged from their capsule alive and well. Apollo 13 was officially classified as a successful failure, a mission which had failed to attain its original objective. But the real story of that journey, which would eventually be made into an Academy Award-winning motion picture, is the triumph of human ingenuity and heroism under fire. As passionately as World War II had united Americans in common cause, the Vietnam conflict set Americans against each other. Fanning those divisions, President Nixon referred to student demonstrators as bums, while his vice president, Spiro Agnew, advised police to just imagine they are wearing brown shirts or white sheets and act accordingly. On May 4th, 1970, Agnew got his wish. The Kent State Massacre began as one among hundreds of protests taking place on college campuses around the country that weekend, sparked by President Nixon's televised announcement to widen the Vietnam War by launching airstrikes inside the borders of neutral Cambodia. Fully armed but inexperienced National Guard units were put into service to quell the demonstrations.
For your own safety,
Suddenly, the smell of smoke and the sound of gunfire split the air. A local reporter witnessed the whole tragic event.
At the request of the Portage County prosecutor, an injunction has been imposed by County Judge Albert Karras, barring all persons from the KSU campus except those specifically authorized by the Ohio National Guard. The injunction requires all students living on campus to depart as soon as possible and at the latest by 12 noon tomorrow. At this point, the majority of students have left the campus and many are awaiting rides from parents and friends. The injunction has been imposed as a result of this weekend's campus disorders. This afternoon, 4 persons, including 2 women, were shot and killed on the campus during renewed demonstrations involving hundreds of students.
Members of the National Guard units at Kent State had fired loaded weapons without warning into crowds of anti-war protesters. A similar incident 10 days later claimed 2 more lives at Jackson State University in Mississippi. In the fevered aftermath of the shootings, a presidential commission was formed and concluded that the National Guard's action of firing into the crowd was unnecessary, unwarranted, and inexcusable. But however one viewed the tragedy, one conclusion seemed inescapable. The war had come home. The modern Olympic Games were conceived as a refuge of peace and fraternity in an otherwise imperfect world. But the Games haven't always turned out that way. Politics and ethnic grievances have managed to infect and infest even this most sportsmanlike of environments. The most tragic instance occurred during the 1972 Games in Munich, Germany. In the midst of the Games, Palestinian terrorists murdered 2, then kidnapped 9 members of the Israeli Olympic team, holding them and the Games hostage.
The News and Special Events Divisions of the Mutual Broadcasting System present a special report on today's act of terrorism at the Olympic Games in Munich, West Germany. This is Dick Rossay in New York. Early this morning, a group of Arab terrorists burst into the Israeli compound at the Olympic Village in Munich. They shot and killed the wrestling coach of the Israeli team. They took nearly a dozen other Israelis hostage. At Olympic Village, at the other end of this line, Charles A. King.
This scene in the Olympic Village today became the symbol of man's inhumanity to man as an organization called the Black September Movement, a Palestine guerrilla organization, scaled the fences of the Olympic compound and with machine guns blazing entered the Israeli housing compound, killed 2 men, and are still holding hostages.
From your vantage point, does it look as though the negotiations will resume, or is it a deadlock?
Well, actually, the deadline was almost an hour and a half ago. There were 3 deadlines set, one at 1 o'clock this afternoon, Munich time, the second at 3, and then again at 5. And while some of the police have moved forward, nothing else has happened.
Then the kidnappers tried to transport their hostages out of the country. The world held its breath as suspense turned to nightmare. An attempt by German police to surprise the kidnappers precipitated a gun battle at the airport in Munich. The results were tragic. All 9 Israeli hostages were murdered by their captors, while 5 of the terrorists and 1 German police officer died in the melee. The Olympic Games, which began thousands of years ago as a form of worship and imitation of the ancient Greek gods, went on. But they remain inescapably human events, marred by evils and imperfections, even while aspiring toward the heavens. Richard M. Nixon's career seemed to thrive on paradox. He was a man famous for his lack of personal grace, yet he became the only candidate in U.S. history who was twice elected both president and vice president. In the moments of his greatest triumph, he planted the seeds of future self-destruction, while his most public failures only seemed to gird his determination to mount ever more astonishing comebacks. In November 1972, Nixon was re-elected president in a landslide, carrying 49 of 50 states. But in the midst of that election campaign, Nixon's paranoia and distrust led to his downfall. Determined not to be blindsided by political dirty tricks, he planted one of his own, authorizing a burglary attempt of the Democratic Party headquarters at Washington's Watergate Hotel. The intruders were caught, setting into motion a White House cover-up, which would take 2 years to unravel. Yet unravel it did, leading to televised Senate hearings with all the drama of a daily soap opera. By the summer of 1974, many of Nixon's top aides had resigned and were under legal indictment. Finally, a tape recording system Nixon had installed in the White House provided evidence that the president had been involved in the cover-up all along.
This is an NBC News Hotline report. This is Steve Porter. The rapidly unfolding events in Washington point to the resignation of President Richard Nixon today. An announcement was made at the White House a short time ago, and on the line with me to discuss that is NBC News White House correspondent Russ Ward in Washington.
Yes, Steve, there's no doubt in anyone's mind now that the resignation announcement will be forthcoming tonight. We were informed at 11 o'clock this morning, Eastern Time, that the president had called the vice president into his Oval Office for a private meeting. That private meeting lasted an hour and 10 minutes. A short time later, Press Secretary Ronald Ziegler came into the briefing room and had this announcement.
Tonight at 9 o'clock, Eastern Daylight Time, the President of the United States will address the nation on radio and television from his Oval Office.
Facing near certain impeachment, Nixon spoke on television to the American people on August 8, 1974, and announced that he would become the first president in U.S. history to resign from that office.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
1 month later, Nixon's successor, Gerald Ford, closed the Watergate saga by granting Nixon a presidential pardon.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have come to a decision which I felt I should tell you and all of my fellow American citizens. As soon as I was certain in my own mind and in my own conscience that it is the right thing to do. There are no historic or legal precedents to which I can turn in this matter, none that precisely fit the circumstances of a private citizen who has resigned the presidency of the United States. Now, therefore, I, Gerald R. Ford, President of the United States, pursuant to the pardon power conferred upon me by Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, have granted, and by these presents do grant, a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon for all offenses against the United States which he, Richard Nixon, has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from July 20, 1969 through August 9, 1974.
For several years after that, Nixon slipped from view, and many observers assumed that his public career had ended at last. And yet, slowly but surely, he came back once more. In 1993, he returned to the House of Representatives and began his speech by humorously echoing General Douglas MacArthur's famous farewell. "Old politicians may die," he told the assembled congressmen, "but they never fade away." On January 27, 1973, the U.S. signed a peace agreement in Paris, along with the governments of North and South Vietnam and the Viet Cong Provisional Military Government, after which American forces made a slow, final withdrawal from South Vietnam, a process President Richard Nixon called peace with honor. But once U.S. troops were sent home, North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces quickly overwhelmed the official South Vietnamese forces. The end came quickly on April 30th, 1975, and the nation watched the end on television as helicopters landed on the embassy roof and transported away the last American staff members and soldiers on duty, leaving behind hundreds of Vietnamese citizens within the embassy walls to meet an uncertain fate.
This is an NBC News Hotline Report. I'm Mike Moss. Communist forces reportedly have invaded Saigon in heavy street fighting in what appears to be the beginning of the final battle for the South Vietnamese capital. We have a report from NBC's Robert Wiener in Saigon.
Saigon came under attack about a half an hour after President Min was sworn in at the presidential palace. Immediately after that, all sorts of firing broke out here in Saigon. Small arms fire, machine gun fire, rockets on the street. We've been pinned down here in the NBC office. It's been impossible for us to get down on the street level to see exactly what's happened.
That's NBC's Robert Wiener in Saigon. The communist forces appear to have invaded the South Vietnamese capital.
In the final hours of that chaotic day, peace and honor were both in short supply. As North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces entered Saigon, hundreds of South Vietnamese citizens who had been promised a safe passage out of that country massed inside the gates of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. It marked an ignominious end to American involvement in a war that had never been officially declared, yet had cost the lives of over 50,000 American soldiers and hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese soldiers and citizens. But after 20 years, American involvement in Vietnam was finally over. The rise of Elvis Presley in the 50s might have seemed on the surface to have more to do with sex than with music. He came to prominence at a moment when teenagers were growing in numbers and wielding economic clout, while technology made possible the mass medium in which his music could flourish. Transistor radios, portable record players, and, of course, television, where his good looks dazzled perhaps more than his voice. Elvis himself had no conscious political agenda, but he was altering the social consciousness of a generation by turning them on to the power and allure of music, which had sprung directly from black culture, and young white teenagers lapped it up. Elvis would put together a string of hit records in the late 50s, followed by over 30 motion pictures. But by the 60s and 70s, he was overshadowed by more flamboyant and daring musical performers in the evolving musical culture. By August 16, 1977, he seemed more like an afterthought than a revolutionary figure, a man whose legend seemed much older than his 42 years.
Elvis Presley, dead at the age of 42. I'm John Meyer. Elvis Presley died today at Baptist Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. Presley was 42 years old. He parlayed a $4 visit to a recording studio into a multi-million-dollar career. He was rushed to the hospital late this afternoon, suffering from what officials say was respiratory distress. The county medical examiner in Memphis, Dr. Jerry Francisca, says
the cause of the cardiac arrhythmia is not known at present time. It may never be known because there are several possible causes for cardiac arrhythmia, including high blood pressure and coronary artery disease, and he had both of those diseases. So either or both acting together might have been responsible.
Here in Washington, the White House issued a statement on the death of Presley. A report from Mutual News correspondent Duff Thomas.
In that statement, the president said Presley's music and personality, fusing the styles of white country and black rhythm and blues, permanently changed the face of American popular culture. He was a symbol to the people of the world over of the vitality, rebelliousness, and good humor of his country, unquote. The White House has no plans at this time for a day of national mourning. However, there's speculation that Presley's memory may someday be honored with a civilian medal for contributions to entertainment. Duff Thomas, the White House.
You're listening to The World Today.
News of Elvis's death flashed around the world that afternoon. Yet on the CBS Evening News that night, It was reported after 5 other stories. But as crowds began to swell into the thousands outside the gates of his Graceland home in Memphis, another chapter of Elvis mania began to emerge. Elvis Presley remains an American legend whose myth refuses to fade. It was a mass kidnapping that brought the most powerful nation on earth to its knees. In January of 1979, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, whose family had ruled Iran for decades, was overthrown in a popular revolution and succeeded by a government headed by the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a Shiite Muslim religious leader. Khomeini's followers were angry at America for supporting the Shah's regime, and after Pahlavi was allowed to enter the United States for medical reasons, that anger exploded. On November 4th, 1979, hundreds of Iranian students overran the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of Americans hostage who were stationed there.
The U.S. Embassy in Tehran remains occupied by Iranian students demanding extradition of the Shah and a total break in relations with America. Although as many as 100 people are being held hostage, the State Department says there's no reason to panic.
From what we have gathered, this demonstration is peaceful, and the fact that the demonstrators themselves have described this as a sit-in.
The State Department spokesman reports receiving assurances from Iran's government that all hostages are safe. Ayatollah Khomeini today denounced the American embassy in Tehran as a center of spying and plotting.
Khomeini endorsed the students' actions and demanded that the U.S. return the Shah to Iran as a condition for their release. When President Jimmy Carter rejected that demand, it marked the beginning of a standoff, which would endure for 13 months and outlive both Carter's presidency and even the Shah himself. The sight of American hostages being paraded through the streets of Tehran shocked and angered citizens at home. Pressure mounted for the U.S. government to force a resolution to the crisis. After months of fruitless negotiations, Carter set into motion a secret rescue mission in April of 1980. But it ended in disaster when a helicopter and a transport plane collided in the Iranian desert, killing 8 American soldiers.
President Carter moments ago issued a statement about the rescue team, which obviously appeals to the Iranian terrorists to continue using restraint.
The mission on which they were embarked was a humanitarian mission. It was not directed against Iran. It was not directed against the people of Iran. It was not undertaken with any feeling of hostility toward Iran or its people. It has caused no Iranian casualties.
Iranian terrorists who in the past have threatened to kill the hostages should the U.S. try any military action say now they'll announce a decision after an investigation.
In November of 1980, President Carter was soundly defeated by Ronald Reagan. But Carter doggedly continued negotiations to free the hostages and finally succeeded in his efforts. Ironically, Iran released the remaining 52 American hostages within minutes of Ronald Reagan's swearing in as president.
The Marine Band performing in the opening ceremony here of the inauguration of Ronald Reagan. For those of you just joining us, there is confirmation from the major wire services now that the American hostages are indeed aboard Algerian planes that have taken them from Tehran Airport. The planes have taken off reportedly from the airport. Airport officials have confirmed the takeoff.
All 52 hostages returned home. Amazingly, no one had died during their extremely trying ordeal. Their return was marked across the country by expressions of joy and relief, tempered perhaps by the hard-earned knowledge that for all its military power, the United States was like all other peoples and nations, subject to events beyond its control. Few before him, and even fewer after, would so eloquently voice the social concerns of his generation. Through his lyrics and peace-loving activism, John Lennon became more than a mere entertainer. He became an icon, a cult figure whose fans hung on his every word. The music of Lennon and his famed Beatles would form the soundtrack to a cultural revolution throughout the 60s. After the band's breakup in 1970, Lennon remained in the public eye as a successful solo act and vocal social activist, before finally retreating to his quiet life as a house husband in 1975. But in 1980, he would reemerge with a new album and a new passion for recording. He was returning from the studio when the unthinkable happened.
John Lennon was brought to the emergency room shortly before 11 p.m. He was dead on arrival.
Dr. Stephen Lynn of New York City's Roosevelt Hospital making the announcement that musician, composer, and former Beatle John Lennon is dead. Lennon was shot to death outside his New York apartment around 11 o'clock Eastern Time.
There were numerous wounds that entered the heart and the large vessels within the chest, causing a massive blood loss that could not be repaired or restored.
Dr. Lynn says Lennon suffered at least 7 gunshot wounds. Lennon was ambushed as he and his wife Yoko Ono were returning home from a recording session, allegedly by Hawaii native David Chapman.
Mr. Chapman came up behind him and called to him, Mr. Lennon, as he arrived at that doorway. And then in a combat stance, he emptied the Charter Arms .38 caliber gun that he had with him and shot John Lennon.
As news of John Lennon's murder broke, airwaves around the world were filled with his music. Millions of Americans were seated comfortably in front of their televisions watching the New England Patriots battle the Miami Dolphins on ABC Television's Monday Night Football, when commentator Howard Cosell interrupted the play-by-play with the tragic news.
In case the folks missed the earlier news flash, ABC News has confirmed that John Lennon, a member of the famed Beatles, maybe the best-known member, was shot twice in the back outside of his apartment building in the west side of New York tonight, rushed to the Roosevelt Hospital, dead on arrival. An unspeakable tragedy. Details on Nightline 30 minutes after the end of this contest.
Lennon was fatally shot by a disturbed fan named Mark David Chapman, who just hours before had received Lennon's autograph on an album cover. The assassination had the style and twisted motive of a political assassination, and to his millions of fans, the impact felt the same. But this time the target was not a powerful policymaker, but a simple musician with a yearning for peace. When Ronald Reagan was elected president in November 1980, he hoped to defy an unusually grim circumstance of that office. In the 7 previous even-numbered decades, every U.S. president had died in office, 4 times from assassins' bullets. A few months later, on March 30th, 1981, as President Reagan strolled outside the Washington Hilton Hotel, he nearly met the same fate.
Here is a news bulletin from the RKO radio network. This just in, shots have reportedly been fired as President Reagan left the Washington Hilton Hotel this afternoon. White House officials say the president was not hit, but there are reports that 3 people were wounded by gunfire. Correspondent Joe Ewald was there when the shooting happened.
It was a quick series of explosions sounding like firecrackers. At that moment, President Reagan was getting in his limousine. He was pushed on into the back seat by one of the Secret Service agents. Right after that, there was a scuffle, agents and policemen swarming around the man with a gun. They surged back toward where I was standing near one of the doors of the hotel. They quickly subdued him, wrestled him to the ground, and then put him in a police car. I looked back toward where the president had been. There were 3 men lying on the ground. You could see them bleeding.
Reagan was shot by a young man named John Hinckley, Jr., who'd become obsessed by movie actress Jodie Foster and had imagined that she would be impressed if he murdered the president. Opening fire with a .22 caliber pistol, he wounded a local police officer, a Secret Service agent, and most seriously, Reagan's press secretary, James Brady. Later that afternoon, all 3 major networks even reported that Brady had died.
A report that the White House news secretary is dead. The president survives an assassination attempt. I'm Bob Morrison. That report, however, denied by the White House.
As far as the report about Jim Brady, it is untrue, and he is in serious condition.
And that is Larry Speaks, the deputy news secretary, denying reports that said James Brady, the White House news secretary, was dead following an assassination attempt today. President Reagan remains in surgery at a Washington, D.C. hospital, George Washington University Hospital.
But James Brady survived his wounds. So did President Reagan, who impressed the nation with his grace and humor while recovering in the hospital, and who went on to serve 2 full terms as president. John Hinckley successfully argued an insanity plea and was immediately remanded to a high-security psychiatric hospital for an indeterminate term. James Brady suffered brain damage due to the gunshot wound he sustained to the head. He and his wife went on to successfully lobby for legislation that severely restricts the access and use of the type of handguns that had nearly cost him his life. The Space Shuttle Challenger flew 8 missions into space and completed 69 days and 987 orbits after its first launch in 1982. But its fateful 9th mission, which lasted only 74 seconds, ensured its tragic place in history. On the morning of January 28, 1986, a crew of 7 boarded the Challenger, including a New Hampshire high school teacher named Krista McAuliffe, representing the aspirations of so-called ordinary citizens to journey into space. It was an adventure vicariously shared by millions of Americans through television, as the Challenger lifted off at 11:39 a.m. from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida and hurtled majestically into the sky.
We have main engine start, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Challenger.
But less than 2 minutes later, horror struck in full view of all who watched.
We have a report relayed through the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. We are now looking at all the contingency operations and awaiting word from any recovery forces in the downrange field.
President Ronald Reagan canceled his scheduled State of the Union address that night, instead appearing on nationwide television, attempting to console a country in mourning.
I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Investigations would later suggest that the failure of a seal known as an O-ring had led to the fiery destruction of the shuttle. As Neil Armstrong's first step on the moon seemed to epitomize the 60s spirit of limitless possibilities, the sight of the Challenger exploding on television seemed to palpably sap the national will toward manned flights into space. Exploration would go on, but heady dreams of space-age travel were soberly tempered by the fate of the Challenger mission. It was a wall that literally split a city in two, dividing families from friends, East from West, and communism from capitalism. The Berlin Wall was erected in 1961 by an East German government determined to stop the mass exodus of its citizens into West Berlin, which was an oasis of democracy in otherwise communist East Germany. And it worked all too well. Guarded on its eastern flank by soldiers and guard dogs, illuminated from watchtowers, the 12-foot-high wall became a killing ground for hundreds of citizens who tried to escape by scaling its confines, and it stood for 28 years as an implacable symbol of the Cold War. But by the late 1980s, communist regimes throughout Eastern Europe had begun to fall apart. By 1989, neighboring Czechoslovakia had turned to democracy and began allowing East German citizens free passage into West Germany, rendering the wall obsolete. Then, on November 9, 1989, East Berlin officially announced that its borders to West Germany would be opened for private trips abroad. Within hours, thousands of jubilant citizens from both East and West Berlin began massing at the wall to celebrate, freely crossing into what had been forbidden territory for nearly 3 decades. The end of the Berlin Wall was at hand.
Berlin's famous Freedom Bell rang out over the newly opened border.
I climbed over the wall and come and walk
through the Brandenburg Gate.
I jumped over the wall. It's a great feeling.
I'm happy. I have been dreaming of this for years.
After 28 years, the East German government has thrown open the nation's prison-like Berlin Wall, and thousands of East and West Germans have been partying on the wall ever since, some chipping away at sections of the 20-mile-long wall. This in sharp contrast to what Mutual's Dick Rosset saw 27 years ago, a year after the wall went up.
I've just left Bernauer Strasse, where a crowd of perhaps 500 to 1,000 West Berliners are angrily protesting the Berlin Wall. I'm driving in an open car and was just subjected to a barrage of tear gas. At this point, it's too difficult to determine which side tossed the bombs, the East or the West Berliners.
President Bush, like many Americans, has been watching as East and West Germans test the open border.
I was moved, as you all were, by the pictures of Berliners from East and West standing atop the wall with chisels and hammers, celebrating the opening of the most vivid symbol of the Iron Curtain.
The next day, November 10th, 1989, the final demolition of the Berlin Wall began, this time symbolizing the demise of communist regimes throughout Eastern Europe. By 1991, the Berlin Wall, that once seemingly unconquerable edifice, had almost completely vanished, along with an entire system of government it had come to represent. After 1989, the Soviet Union began to crack apart like an iceberg into independent republics. The Cold War seemed to be over. But conflict, like power, abhors a vacuum. In 1990, a new conflict with global implications arose in the Middle East as Iraq invaded its oil-rich neighbor, Kuwait. Acting to protect its own economic interests in the area, the United States was quick to respond. When formal demands that Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein abandon his occupation went unheeded, President George Bush promised an overwhelming show of military force. He delivered an official ultimatum on January 16, 1991, announcing that Operation Desert Storm had begun.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
Although the major radio and television networks had crews positioned in Baghdad, as well as throughout the Gulf region, CNN was the only network to secure a dedicated phone line into their Baghdad bureau. From their exclusive vantage point, CNN correspondents John Holloman, Bernard Shaw, and Peter Arnett managed to broadcast the sounds of the initial bombing barrage as it occurred. For the first time in history, America listened to a war at the moment it began.
We're going to Bernard Shaw in Baghdad.
This is, something is happening outside. Peter Arnett, join me here. Let's describe to our viewers what we're seeing. The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated. We're seeing bright flashes going off all over the sky. Peter?
Well, there's anti-aircraft gunfire going into the sky. We hear the sound of planes. They're coming over our hotel. However, we have not yet heard the sound of bombs landing, but there's tremendous lightning in the sky, lightning like a fix. Bernie?
I have a sense, Peter, that people are shooting towards the sky, and they are not aware or cannot see what they're shooting at. This is extraordinary.
Employing devastating air power, the United States pulverized Iraq with tens of thousands of bombs, while incurring relatively few casualties of its own. The air attacks severely weakened Iraqi troops, setting them up for a ground attack that would push them from Kuwait in just 100 hours. Broadcast on television, The aerial nighttime raids seemed lit with the strange phosphorescence of a video game. As in Vietnam before it, television demonstrated its ability to mold public opinion by either exposing or inoculating viewers to the true horrors of war. But this time, there was no tape delay. The world watched as the destruction occurred. It all began with a handheld video camera and ended with the whole world watching a great city going up in flames. The first reports from Los Angeles had an all-too-familiar ring. An African-American motorist who'd been stopped by police for drunk driving was pulled out of his car and beaten by several white officers while others stood around and watched. But this time, the entire incident was captured on a bystander's video camera, then broadcast via television around the world. Local and national leaders condemned the police action, but when the offending officers went on trial, a jury from nearby Ventura County saw things differently. On April 29, 1992, the jury, none of whom were African American, announced that it had reached a deadlock on a single assault charge, then acquitted the 4 police officers of all other criminal charges. For thousands of local citizens, such an apparently blatant miscarriage of justice proved too much to bear. Within minutes after the King verdict was announced, an angry, spontaneous uprising erupted that even King himself proved helpless to stop.
Please, we can get along here. We all can get along. We just gotta, you know. I mean, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out.
Special report. Verdict sparks violence. National Guard troops are standing by, ready to patrol the streets of Los Angeles, rocked by widespread violence following the not guilty verdicts in the trial of 4 white Los Angeles police officers charged with beating an unarmed black man. At least 5 people are dead. More than 130 have been hurt, including reporter Bob Brill.
Now I see smoke. Something. Can't tell. Oh, God! No! No! Okay.
Also among the injured, a fireman shot in the mouth while fighting one of dozens of intentionally set blazes. This South Los Angeles resident condemns the destruction.
When they burn the business, they put people out of work. The people who worked in these buildings now, they might have to go on welfare.
California Governor Pete Wilson is also calling for peace.
This is a matter that needs to be settled in the courts and not in the streets.
Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley has imposed a dusk-to-dawn curfew in the hardest-hit areas.
Over the next 3 days, thousands of fires were set. Police headquarters were stormed, and hundreds of buildings were vandalized or destroyed. Over 50 people died. It was an eerie replay of the Watts riots 30 years before, which had left much of Los Angeles' inner-city community in ruins, and a sober reminder, if one were needed, that when it comes to race relations in America, the gap between rhetoric and reality remains dangerously wide. It began with predictions of an apocalypse, and it ended when those predictions came true. Led by charismatic speaker David Koresh, the Branch Davidians were an obscure religious group which had set up its own compound in Mount Carmel, Texas, several miles outside the nearest city of Waco. But the Davidians attracted the attention of federal agents when they spent nearly $200,000 on automatic weapons and hand grenades. When the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to serve a search warrant, the Davidians responded with gunfire, resulting in the deaths of 4 ATF agents and 6 compound members. A 51-day standoff followed, during which 37 members of the church left the compound as negotiations for David Koresh's surrender ground to a halt. On the morning of April 19, 1993, the ATF and FBI staged a surprise attack, hoping to flush out the remaining members of the compound with tear gas. The world watched as their plan turned into disaster.
Well, at around 5 minutes after 6 local time, one of the engineering tanks went up to the front of the Branch Davidian compound and punched a hole through the front of the building through the window. and then it backed up. It's been unusual that we've had any tanks moving around before the sun came up anyway, and within the past couple of minutes, heard 3 gunshots.
During the raid, simultaneous fires broke out in 3 locations within the compound, and systematic gunfire was heard coming from inside, leaving several agents with the impression that Davidians were killing themselves or each other.
I can't tell you the shock and the horror that all of us felt when we saw those flames coming out there. It was, oh my God, they're killing themselves. We did not want that to occur.
By the time the smoke had cleared, more than 80 men, women, and children had perished inside.
His desire, and I've stated it repeatedly, as much as I could without seeming overly dramatic, was that he wanted to have as many people killed in that compound as possible. That is why it was named the Ranch Apocalypse.
Looking at it now, I see smoke coming from what used to be the compound, but I cannot see any structure, any building still standing. The Branch Davidian compound that we have come to know and become so familiar with is gone.
No comparable event had ever been witnessed live on global television. To many Americans, the ATF attack on the Branch Davidians was a sad but inevitable consequence of the religious cult's own bizarre brand of religious and political militancy. But among like-minded fringe groups in the American heartland, the ATF raid became a literal call to arms, one which would set the stage for vengeful acts of homegrown terrorism. He was an extraordinarily gifted athlete, the premier football player of his time, a California success story who emerged from abject poverty to win the Heisman Trophy in college and set records as a pro football running back. Effortless grace and a ready smile eased his transition from ex-athlete to corporate-backed celebrity. But even without formal training as an actor, he found steady work in movies and as a commercial pitchman on TV, where his friendly, familiar countenance was regularly beamed into millions of welcoming living rooms. In an era when black sports celebrities from Muhammad Ali to Curt Flood risked their reputations and careers for political causes, O.J. Simpson was a remarkably non-controversial, unassuming star. All of that changed on the night of June 13, 1994, when his ex-wife, Nicole Simpson, and her acquaintance, Ronald Goldman, were found brutally murdered. Evidence gleaned from the murder site suggested that the executioner may well have been O.J. Simpson.
Suspect wanted for a double 187 in West LA Division. Suspect named Orenthal James Simpson, O.J. Simpson. Suspect may be driving a white or light-colored Ford Bronco. Suspect was last seen wearing a yellow golf shirt, faded blue jeans, and white Reebok tennis shoes. Suspect is possibly armed. Use caution.
But when police decided to arrest Simpson 2 days later, an even more surreal tableau unfolded, live on national television.
911, what are you reporting?
This is AC. I have OJ in the car.
Okay, where are you?
Please, I'm coming up the 5 freeway.
Okay.
Right now, we are okay, but you gotta tell the police to just back off. He's still alive, but he got a gun to his head.
Okay, hold on a minute.
From the stunning freeway car chase, through the lengthy courtroom machinations of a murder trial, the soap opera that was the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson mesmerized the nation. But even as lawyers, police officers, and obscure friends and relatives of the plaintiffs and defendants vied to receive their allotted 15 minutes of fame, the trial also exposed more profound divisions of race and class among the nation's unofficial jury of millions.
All right, Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury?
Time stood still on the morning of October 3rd, 1995, when the officially sequestered jury in the trial gathered to announce their final verdict.
Mrs. Robertson.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson, a human being, as charged in count 1 of the information. Superior Court of the State of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the State of California versus Orenthal James Simpson. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony, upon Ronald Lyle Goldman, a human being, as charged in Count 2 of the information. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, further find the special circumstance that the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, has in this case been convicted of at least one crime of murder of the first degree and one or more crimes of murder of the first or second degree to be not true. Signed this second day of October 1995, Juror 230. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict? So say you one, so say you all.
All right, just have it quiet in the courtroom, please. All right, Mrs. Robertson, would you please poll the jurors?
In the end, an ex-athlete whose case was debated not only in the courts, but at water coolers across the country, had been the subject of the most widely covered and talked about criminal trial in American legal history. On April 19, 1995, 2 years to the day following the U.S. government's botched raid on the Branch Davidian compound near Waco, Texas, a rented truck pulled to the curb in front of the 9-story Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in downtown Oklahoma City. Inside the building, over 350 federal employees and visitors were beginning their workday.
With regard to this proceeding, basically...
In a building across the street, a meeting was being held by the Oklahoma City Water Resources Board. The meeting was being recorded. Then, at 9:04 a.m., came the explosion that would alter the American social and political landscape.
There are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
Everybody, let's get out of here. Now, watch the electricity line. Watch the light. Watch the light. Let me out. Out the back door. All the way to your right. Hurry.
Local radio and television stations rushed to the site, and the monstrous effects of the bombing were broadcast around the world.
My floor was okay, and the ceiling had come down, but there was still concrete above, so it was just a corner of the office that was left that we were in. Everybody else that we worked with is gone.
The building exploded into rubble. 167 people had been killed, 19 of them children, and hundreds were badly injured.
A blizzard of papers blowing out of offices that have been heavily damaged by this bomb in the downtown area. I'm just about 300 yards away from the front of this building that has been ripped off by this powerful blast. And yet buildings all around me here have suffered extensive damage. Up on top of the roof of one of these buildings, a brick wall has been blown over. And on this 4th floor of this parking garage, the elevator doors have been blown off the hinges. That was the force of this blast. Ross Simpson, Oklahoma City.
It was the worst terrorist attack ever on U.S. soil. And the terrorists were American. Just 90 minutes after the explosion, Oklahoma police arrested 27-year-old Timothy McVeigh, a veteran of the Gulf War, for driving without a license. Evidence soon linked McVeigh and his friend Terry Nichols with the bombing, which was planned as an act of revenge against the U.S. government for what had occurred 2 years before, near Waco. Both men stood trial for their crimes. In June 1997, Timothy McVeigh was convicted of murder and sentenced to die by lethal injection. 6 months later, Terry Nichols was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. He received a life sentence. TWA Flight 800 set off from New York to Paris at about 8 o'clock on the evening of July 17, 1996, carrying a full flight of students, executives, diplomats, and summer vacation revelers. For its first half hour of flight, nothing unusual seemed to occur, except for indications that a fuel flow indicator was acting up. causing the plane to ascend at a slightly abnormal rate. At 8:30, Flight 800 was given permission from Boston Air Control to climb from 13 to 15,000 feet. "Climb to 15,000, affirmed Captain Snyder. "Power set," said Flight Engineer Richard Campbell. No further words were spoken. 37 seconds later, TWA Flight 800 exploded over the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Long Island, killing everyone on board.
A Boeing 747 jetliner with 229 people on board. It was 8:48. TWA Flight 800 had just taken off from New York's JFK Airport for Paris when it disappeared from radar south of central Long Island. The Coast Guard has mobilized dozens of boats, according to Coast Guard Lieutenant Commander Jim McPherson.
We're in this for the long haul. We're going to search until we've exhausted all hope, no matter how long it takes.
Nor how much it takes.
Every cutter and every aircraft in the East Coast is being sent, in the Northeast coast is being sent to that area.
It now comes to the question, of course, the big question, why? James Hall, Chairman, National Transportation Safety Board.
We are paid by the taxpayers to go and investigate and present the facts. And until we have an opportunity to develop the facts, we do not have any speculation in regard to the cause of the accident.
Still, eyewitnesses indicate 2 explosions in midair. And it's interesting to note that while the National Transportation Safety Board has taken over the investigation, the FBI is opening its own investigation, along with New York City's police terrorism experts. TWA Vice President Mike Kelly says that he and staffers have checked the paperwork of those on board the plane. All seems to have been in order.
We've inspected our ordinary boarding documents. It appears to us right now to have been a perfectly ordinary international departure for TWA from JFK. Really no anomalies.
Terrorism was immediately suspected as the cause of the crash, not least because it occurred during the 1996 Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta. At the Atlanta Press Center, like everywhere else in the country, the television screens were full of live pictures of the fiery debris from the site of the crash. For the next 16 months, the FBI, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the National Transportation Safety Board conducted an unprecedented investigation. More than 96% of the plane's parts were retrieved and examined. Dozens of theories were proffered and explored, including one that an errant U.S. missile had inadvertently destroyed the plane. But when all was said and done, there was no compelling evidence to suggest an explanation of any sort except mechanical failure. A small spark of unknown origin ignited the central fuel tank. But it was a conclusion marked with uncertainty, leaving a shroud of mystery over Flight 800. Since the Munich Olympic Games of 1972, each subsequent Olympiad has been accompanied by ever greater and more expensive security measures. As a reprieve from the high-tech precautions, Atlanta offered Centennial Park, a less secure public area where anyone could share in the excitement of the Games. On Saturday night, July 27th, the park was teeming with Olympic partygoers, athletes, tourists, and local citizens. But just before 1 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Time, Atlanta's 911 Bureau received an anonymous phone call claiming a bomb had been planted in Centennial Park. "You have 30 minutes," the caller said. Police began ordering people to leave the park, but their attempt to evacuate the area came too late.
Special report, Olympic Park bombing. I'm Bob Fuss. A pipe bomb exploded at the Centennial Olympic Park in Atlanta, killing at least 2 people, injuring more than 100 Olympic fans who had gathered there for a free rock concert. This is what the explosion sounded like when it was recorded at the park. Thousands of people were there at the park. They were running in all directions, and some of the witnesses described it this way.
I'm just in awe because the whole thing has been about love and peace, and that someone would have the nerve to take advantage of this. I'm just in awe because so many people that I care about could be involved in this.
I didn't get hit, but someone standing right behind me did. We put this person on a bench, and we made sure that they got an ambulance.
I don't really know what happened.
It happened really quick. I think people are hurt. And we were there. We were there.
A homemade bomb shot shrapnel and nails into the dense crowd, killing 2 people and wounding 110 others. National Guard troops quickly secured nearby streets and sealed off several blocks around the perimeter to the park. In the hysterical aftermath, suspicion centered around the man who had first discovered the knapsack which had contained the bomb, a security guard named Richard Jewell. Although Jewell was never charged with any crime, his name was leaked to the press, hundreds of whom descended on his apartment in droves, subjecting an innocent man to trial by media. No other individual or group has ever claimed responsibility for the Atlanta Olympic bombing, and the crime remains unsolved. She was a princess who never lived happily ever after, and the world loved her for it. Diana Spencer became a global celebrity when she wedded England's Prince Charles in 1981. But the fairy tale marriage soon unraveled, and after no end of adulterous revelations and public separations, finally ended in divorce. But Diana remained a princess in the hearts of her millions of fans and of the mass media, who faithfully chronicled her every move. In the summer of 1997, Diana had a new love in her life, an Egyptian jet-setter named Dodi Fayed, whose father owned London's famed Harrods department store. On August 31st, 1997, they enjoyed a day of rarefied pleasures, sunning in Sardinia, flying to Paris, and dining that evening at the Ritz Hotel, which was ringed by dozens of photographers eager to snap Diana's visage. After dinner, Fayed wished to transport Diana back to his apartment to present her with a $200,000 ring. To elude the paparazzi, Fayed arranged for decoy cars to leave from the front of the Ritz Hotel while he and Diana, along with a bodyguard and a driver, left by the rear. By the time their Mercedes had reached the stoplight at the Place de la Concorde, several blocks away, at least half a dozen paparazzi were already on their tail. Taking off just before the light changed, their driver headed onto a riverfront expressway that led to a long tunnel. Seconds after that, he lost control of the car and crashed into the tunnel's 13th pillar. Photographers arrived seconds later, and news of the accident flashed around the world.
Bulletin, I'm Sean Hall. Reports from Paris, including the British Press Association and Sky TV, say that Princess Diana has died of injuries suffered in a car accident Saturday night. Again, reports from Paris say that Princess Diana has died in a car accident that also killed her companion Dodi Al-Fayed. Stay tuned to this station for more information.
Her funeral several days later became perhaps the most watched event in television history.
This is Earl Spencer.
I stand before you today, the representative of a family in grief, in a country in mourning, before a world in shock.
In death as in life, the legacy of Princess Diana remained inextricably bound with that of the media that had chronicled so many of her most intimate moments, from the altar to the grave. I'm Bill Curtis. In the pre-dawn era of electronic media, late-breaking news was communicated by street corner vendors holding freshly printed stacks of late edition papers, shouting, "Extra, extra, read all about it." Yet in the time it took to prepare and print the special edition, the story was often dated before it ever hit the streets. But with the advent of radio and then television, breaking news could be flashed instantly into our homes, offices, and automobiles. Late editions gave way to bulletins, and shouts of "extra, extra" were replaced by a phrase that has come to command our immediate attention. It's a phrase so powerful that Orson Welles used it to make his famous War of the Worlds broadcast absolutely believable. It's a phrase that evokes a few heart-stopping seconds of anxiety between the interruption and the actual announcement of what has happened. It's a phrase that puts us in the moment. We brace ourselves as we wait to hear the news that follows those four chilling words. We interrupt this broadcast.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast. The German news agency...
We interrupt this program to bring you a news bulletin from Washington. The White House has just announced...
Here is a news bulletin. Shots have reportedly been fired.
Here's another late development, and this news keeps coming in.
This is an NBC News hotline report.
Special report. Verdict sparks violence. National Guard troops are standing...
We interrupt this broadcast is a time capsule of the famous and infamous moments that stopped us in our tracks, combining the sounds and images of nearly a century with the emotional experience each of us has personally associated with these moments. Sudden catastrophes, a victorious end to a world war, senseless acts of terrorism, cold-blooded assassinations, and triumphant achievements of the human spirit. Ever-advancing technology and the emergence of the 24-hour news networks has created an insatiable appetite for news. The consequence is a considerable broadening of what constitutes a real news event and spawning a new genre of broadcast journalism. Stories once considered tabloid are now broadcast live. But the events contained in this book and on the accompanying compact discs were selected because they have stood the test of time. The sounds and images have become part of our very memories, and in turn, defining moments in our lives. We remember forever where we were when they happened, and how we felt when we first heard the news. Each event is presented as it occurred, allowing you to be in the moment again, or perhaps for the very first time. Prepare to relive the events that have changed our outlook on the world forever as we interrupt this broadcast. The Hindenburg was an engineering masterpiece, an airship as large and as grand as the Titanic, and as doomed. Built by the Zeppelin Company in Germany during the 1930s, and at a time when flying a passenger plane across the Atlantic was a difficult and perilous journey, the great dirigibles crossed the ocean with serene and effortless grace. But the popularity of the Hindenburg was clouded in political controversy. Funds for its construction had come in large part from Germany's Nazi Party. The United States, which controlled the only natural deposits of helium in the world, denied the Zeppelin Company access to this valuable gas. As a result, the Hindenburg was inflated with hydrogen, a far more flammable substance. In 1936 alone, the great airship traveled 10 times across the Atlantic without incident. The afternoon of May 6th, 1937, promised to be no different.
Well, here it comes, ladies and gentlemen. We're out now outside of the hangar, and what a great sight it is. A thrilling one.
On hand to record the arrival of the Hindenburg at Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey that day was a young Chicago radio reporter named Herb Morrison. Instead, Morrison helped radio to broadcast one of modern history's great disasters as it suddenly unfolded in all its terrible glory.
The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from It bursts into flames. Get it started. It's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's flashing 400 or 500 feet into the sky. It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen.
Lakehurst, New Jersey. The German dirigible Hindenburg is on fire. How serious is the blaze cannot be determined at this time, but it is reported that the entire ship is involved. This bulletin is from the Press Radio Bureau.
35 passengers died in the explosion of the Hindenburg. Perhaps more incredibly, a few passengers survived. What caused the ship to ignite remains speculative to this day. What is certain is that the explosion signaled the death knell of the passenger airship industry. But even as Herb Morrison's eyewitness report that day chronicled the end of one era, it signaled the beginning of another, an age in which electronic media would routinely report shocking events in the moment that they occurred. Before and after December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii has beckoned visitors to an island paradise in the Pacific. But for 2 hours that morning, it was the site of a sneak attack that changed the course of world events. From that moment on, the name Pearl Harbor would be linked forever with those events, and an unforgettable day that will live in infamy. Well before that fateful morning, political tensions had been mounting between the Japanese Empire and the United States. Japan was already engaged in a fierce war with China and had signed an alliance with Germany in 1940. Though technically avowing neutrality, the U.S. was actively aiding England and other European countries that were at war with Germany, while putting an embargo on supplies such as oil to all of Germany's allies, including Japan. By mid-1941, the Japanese government had decided that war with the United States was inevitable. Even while peace negotiations continued, plans were being made to launch a preemptive airstrike against the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, home base of the Pacific Fleet. Sunday, December 7th, dawned across the rest of America much like any other day.
Our reserves are limited.
The nation's radios were tuned to NBC's religious program, National Vespers, or the New York Philharmonic over CBS, or the football playoff between the New York Giants and Brooklyn Dodgers on the Mutual Network. Then came the news that would shock and unite this nation like no other event in our history.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Stay tuned to WOR for further developments.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special broadcast.
Here's the bulletin. Washington. The President decided today, after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor and Manila, to call an extraordinary meeting of the Cabinet for 8:30 p.m. tonight, and to have congressional leaders of both parties join the conference at 9 p.m. And now we take you to Honolulu.
We have witnessed this morning off Pearl Harbor.
The attack on Pearl Harbor left 2,335 Americans dead, over half of whom perished when a bomb dropped from a Japanese fighter plane detonated the ammunition supplies on the battleship USS Arizona. There were more than 1,000 wounded, and dozens of U.S. ships were destroyed or seriously damaged. But if Japan had hoped to obliterate U.S. opposition by its attack, the results were just the opposite. Shocked and angered, the country united behind President Roosevelt's decision to declare war on Japan.
No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
The day that will live in infamy became only the first of many, as the United States entered the most devastating global conflict in modern history. It was the biggest overseas military operation in the biggest war in world history, and its best-kept secret as well. D-Day, a military term for the first day of a military operation, was a fitting description for the event, which turned the tide of battle in World War II. Plans by the United States and Britain to invade German-occupied Northern Europe had been in the works for nearly 2 years before the summer of 1944, when the supreme commander of those Allied forces, General Dwight Eisenhower, gave his assent to begin a massive landing at the French coastal town of Normandy. Those still awake in America and listening to their radios in the wee hours of June 6, 1944, were most likely listening to the harmonic band of Leo Diamond and his Harmonaires, when suddenly, at 12:41 a.m. Eastern Time, the broadcast was interrupted with the first news of the invasion.
We interrupt our program to bring you a special broadcast. The German news agency Transocean said today in a broadcast that the Allied invasion had begun. I repeat, the German news agency Transocean said today in a broadcast that the Allied invasion had begun. There was no Allied confirmation.
Within hours, official confirmation of the invasion came in a broadcast transmitted from the supreme headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force in London.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
When the news broke, the NBC radio network sounded their 4-chime alert. The 4th chime was a note added to the familiar 3-chime NBC musical signature. It was an emergency signal, sounded on the air, to effect the immediate gathering of key NBC operating personnel responsible for broadcasting news.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the NBC newsroom in New York, where we are standing by to bring you the news of the reported operations against the continent by the Allies, which only the German radio has so far announced. The National Broadcasting Company intends to continue with its network service coast to coast throughout the rest of this night. This is our official notification to stations affiliated with NBC that we will continue broadcasting throughout the remainder of these nighttime hours. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
For the next 24 hours, network radio was on flash basis, ready for round-the-clock operation to broadcast uninterrupted news of the invasion, which Allied forces had termed Operation Overlord, but which would remain forever celebrated as simply D-Day. Despite heavy resistance by German troops, the landings were a tactical success, as Allied troops gained their first foothold in France since the beginning of the German occupation of that nation 4 years earlier. Less than 3 months later, on August 25, 1944, Allied troops liberated the French capital of Paris. As president, he led the United States through 2 of the greatest crises in recent history, the Great Depression and World War II. As a man, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's confidence and vitality made him one of the most beloved figures of the 20th century. Though physically crippled by polio, Roosevelt rallied America through some of its darkest hours, assuring citizens struggling through the Great Depression that they had nothing to fear but fear itself. The nation responded by making him the only man elected president 4 times, the 4th in 1944, despite his increasingly evident deteriorating health. But with the nation still at war with Germany and Japan, the American people stuck with their courageous commander-in-chief. By April 1945, Franklin Roosevelt had been president for more than 12 years, guiding the nation from the brink of economic ruin to the verge of victory in World War II. But on April 12th, while vacationing in Warm Springs, Georgia, he suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Fulton Lewis, Jr., speaking from the Mutual Studios in New York City. This nation has suffered this day a staggering loss. At this moment at Warm Springs, Georgia, President Franklin D. Roosevelt lies with the problems of the nation finally lifted from his shoulders, stricken late this afternoon with cerebral hemorrhage. He passed away before his physicians could be of any assistance, if assistance in such a case is possible at all. Vice President Harry Truman, who from here on will be President Truman, went immediately to the White House. A special cabinet meeting was called, and we should know more about what is going to happen in Washington as the evening wears on. But Franklin D. Roosevelt, the first president to be elected for 4 terms in the White House, has passed away, and that is the overshadowing of all news events that have happened or can happen for quite a while.
The news of Franklin Roosevelt's death plunged the country into shock and mourning. Thousands stood silent along the railroad tracks as the train bearing his coffin made its slow trip from Georgia northward to his final resting place in Hyde Park, New York, bidding goodbye to a president whose indomitable spirit had inspired a nation through poverty and war, and whose legacy would benefit and inspire future generations of Americans for decades to come. Franklin Roosevelt died too soon to witness Germany's final surrender in World War II. But only a week after his death in mid-April of 1945, British and American troops had captured Nuremberg, while Russian forces surrounded Berlin. Having named Grand Admiral Karl Donitz as his successor, Adolf Hitler, along with his new wife, Eva Braun, committed suicide in his Berlin bunker on April 30th. On May 2nd, Red Army troops captured Berlin. Shortly after midnight Eastern Time on May 7th, 1945, news of Germany's official unconditional surrender was heard over the Mutual Network during an interview program featuring actor Helmut Dentin.
The Boyer part, which of course was very thrilling and a bit of good news for me.
Wonderful.
So I don't know what my career...
From the Mutual Newsroom in New York, a bulletin from London. A French communique broadcast by the Paris radio said today that a truce has been concluded in the battle for the French Atlantic port of La Rochelle, and that the Germans have returned 175 French prisoners. And of course, you heard the earlier bulletin. The BBC recorded at 8:09 a.m. Eastern Wartime a Radio Flensburg German broadcast quoting the German foreign minister as announcing that the German High Command accepts unconditional surrender. The Flensburg radio on the German-Danish border said the German surrender decision was reported by Count Ludwig Schwerin von Krosigk, German foreign minister appointed only last week. More news as fast as it is received. Now back to the program in progress.
Well, Helmut, you were in the Austrian army, weren't you?
Good morning from the White House in Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
This is a solemn but a glorious hour. I only wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to witness this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.
For the second time in 30 years, much of the world had mobilized to defeat Germany's war machine, but at a terrible cost. Determined not to let it happen again, the Allied forces partitioned Germany into 2 separate states. Yet this partition would itself become the focus of a new kind of global conflict, the Cold War. It was the most powerful weapon ever unleashed in wartime, an agent of overwhelming destruction that helped to end World War II and ensured that a Third World War would yield no victors at all. The first successful atomic bomb was developed in secrecy by a team of U.S. scientists under the command of Major General Leslie Groves. When the first test explosion occurred in the pre-dawn light in the New Mexico desert on July 16, 1945, Brigadier General Thomas Farrell told Groves, "The war is over." Groves replied, "Yes, after we dropped 2 bombs on Japan." Within 30 days, both men's prophecies came true. At that time, plans were underway for a full-scale military invasion of Japan, an assault that was certain to cost the lives of many thousands of American soldiers. The astonishing power of the atomic bomb suggested that an invasion might not be necessary. "It seems to be the most terrible thing ever discovered," wrote President Truman in his diary, "but it can be made the most useful." Hiroshima, a city on the southwest coast of Japan's main island, became the primary target, due in part to its large military population. Just before 9:15 on the morning of August 6, 1945, 3 U.S. B-29 bombers, the Enola Gay, and 2 escort planes flew over the city and dropped its cargo, a nearly 9,000-pound atomic bomb. 30 seconds later, that bomb exploded 1,850 feet above Hiroshima in a blinding, searing flash of light and heat.
The White House has just made an important announcement on the war. And to bring you this story, we interrupt our program to take you to Washington.
I have just returned from the White House, where it has just been announced that the United States is now using an atomic bomb.
I'm having problems. Not big problems, but Bruno, you're doing it again. Thank you. You can go back to sleep now. You can go back to sleep. He looks at me as like he wants to kill me. You know what I mean? Right. I'm having major problems at the moment, guys. That's why it's been on loop and whatever else. This is a track I am working on at the moment. I'm waiting on feedback on about 2 or 3 tracks. I need a mint. One of them things. So I want to hear this because it's been a while. It might be shit, but we'll have a listen. It might be shit. Needs work. I can do something with it. What else was I going to look at today? Today I was going to, I don't know, get feedback from. I've got my dog cuddling my guitar. And if I had a spare camera, actually what I'll do is use my phone. If I can. Because my phone is shit. Yes, but I have to use it. No. No. Not gonna work. Piece of shit. Never mind. I was gonna set up another camera. Well, see if the cameras work. But wait a minute. I think I forgot something. Have I forgot something? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Right, this is a piece of shit. So we'll go on to next. Let's see, yes, anyway. Bomber. Was that Bomber? It was Bomber. Okay. No worries. Okay. I'll get rid of that. I'm writing so much. As you can see, I've got all these. I want to listen to this one. Can you hear the birdies in the background? Probably the sirens and everything else. Oh, the city sounds. I don't know where this one is. I mean, I can go like this to close off the sound, but the sound's on. Anyway, I want to listen to it and then maybe work on it. I don't know. Anyway, something I'll work on. Right, guys. I know it's not the right sound at the moment, but we'll sort it out in a minute. Dark skies, that's complete. It's in my head. Now this one, obviously it's not complete, but saying that, the kind of stuff I do, sorry, trying to make myself a cigarette, I actually roll my own cigarettes, because I prefer the flavour of the tobacco. I'm not promoting tobacco or alcohol, I'm just saying it's what I do. Anyway, what the fuck am I saying? I mean, that is my life, you do your own fucking shit. You do drugs or whatever else, that's down to you. I think it's basically waste of life if you're going to do that, drugs and stuff. My drug or drugs are beer and cigarettes, that's it. I've dabbled in drugs in the past, but nah, it's not for me. Anyway, get out that fucking section, let's get on with the fucking music. That's what we're here for. And while I'm here, I just want to say I am working on podcasts, live streams. I'm looking for bands to so if you're looking for getting on Spotify playlists and stuff like that, I will put a post at some point where to send your material and stuff like that. But it's going to be on certain days because I've got lots and lots and lots of things I have to do. My own music, number one, so I need to get this sorted out. I have emails to sort out, collaborations and stuff like that. So I can't, like, you come along, yeah, he's going to accept my song, whoa! Yeah, well, yes, I will, but I'm not saying I'm going to promote it, I'm going to work on it, and whatever else. All I'm saying is, basically, I'm stuck at the moment, I'm working on my own stuff, and the weekends, maybe I'll take one or two, I think maximum I'd take about 20 submissions at low cost, listen to them, put them in their certain gene, and then add them to a certain playlist on Spotify. I think that would be a helpful thing for some of you guys. I know but like I've said before, I'm not here as a donation site or whatever else. I'm here to enjoy myself and just chill out. I go around Twitch, I look at guys doing their stuff and whatever else. I don't do cover songs. I never will do cover songs. I have, since I was 19 years old, I have never done a cover song in my life. Yeah. I've always focused on making my own sound, and that's what I'm about. If you're interested and whatever else, with some of your own stuff, then yeah, maybe if I like it, then I'll promote it. It's as simple as that. But if it's shit, it needs work, and that's going to cost you money. That's where maybe I can help, because clean it up and whatever else, I'm not going to charge you 1,600 or whatever else for a remix and stuff like that. I will take my time in the song, and I'll get it to what I think is a clean mix and whatever else. I'll leave it the way you've got it, but I'll clean it up and make it sound good to my ears. I'm not here to say I'm the fucking best mixer and whatever else. Personally, I'm not very good at mixing. I'm very good at clarifying the sound, making it really nice. Just a minute, I need to light my cigarette. Like I said before, I don't do drugs or anything like that. My drug is cigarettes and alcohol. Cigarettes and alcohol. That'll be my next song. Right. My personal goal is to make I can see, with enough donations to the website, okay, to Twitch. Let's say, let me just put this outside. Let's just say, right, if I charge you this is where it comes hard, because let's say $10. $10, 10 euros, whatever. That's just off the top of my head. Now, so I say I'm gonna work on your track. I need all the files like this. I need everything, right? It may take me a week, 2 weeks, or even more, because maybe I say, well, he needs this, he needs that. I'll do that myself. I'll add them little bits. And then I get back to you, I send it to you, I say this is what I've come up with, bam. Okay, you say yes, you accept it. Okay, and I send it back to you. Because I'm sick of going on to SoundCloud. Okay, my stuff is on SoundCloud, but I don't know, Damon and some of the other producers I watch and whatever else, they've got the same problem. Everybody's got the same problem, okay? It's going to cost you roughly, this is off the top of my head, for somebody like me or Damien or anybody else, it's going to cost you roughly per hour is about 200 to 270 an hour to work on your track. And I've decided for a weekend project, right, depending on what track I pick. So I'll just pick a track, bam, and I'll say, I'm going to work on this track. Hello, Nash here, I'm going to work on your track this weekend. If you like it or not, it's up to you. and that's it. That's the way I work. Otherwise, I'm just going to carry on doing my own stuff, showing you and cleaning up your tracks, and the best way to get a best sound, okay, and a few websites you can promote your stuff and things like that. That's what this is all about. But like I say, I'm sick of people emailing me and saying I'm getting ripped off and it's cost me this much and this much and this much. I know, I've been there, trust me. I'm not here to rip anybody off. I'm going to charge you as little as I can, and I will email you and whatever else on a reply saying I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to send you the file. If you like it, you accept it. This is how much it costs. That's as far as I'm going. I am not going to produce, I'm not going to reproduce it, I'm just going to clean it up to the best of my knowledge, and then you can pass your track on to somebody else. I'm not here to say, no, I mean, you might say, okay, I'm into R&B, I'm into this. I don't really give a shit what style of music you're into. I'm just saying, if you've got a home studio or whatever else and you send me a track, the certain things needs to be cleaned up. Yeah, you can ask Damon, you can ask lots of the guys here on Twitch and they'll tell you the same thing, right? They have their own programs. Okay, it's a lot more expensive than mine, but for me it's a weekend project. So I will just go through my emails and I'll just say, okay, I'll listen to your track, there we go, and I'll email you back and say, okay, this needs doing, this needs doing, this is the price, are you up for it? And it's simple as that. I don't want to rip people off. Not into that. And this website, this Twitch thing I'm doing at the moment, it's basically about me, it's about you and everybody else. I'm just here saying, this is what I do. I'm going to show you how I write a song and get on with it. Chat and whatever else, sometimes I'll have it open, sometimes I won't. So you have to be prepared for that if you're going to follow me and you're going to join me. To get your songs played on the actual site and whatever else, I don't know, I'll sort something out later. Spotify playlists and everything else, I can sort that out, it's not a problem. At the moment I'm only interested in rock music and stuff like that. So if you're in a rock band and you're not happy with the mix, it's too muddy and blah 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 blah, then maybe send me something. I will sort that out later on where you can send stuff to me, but at the moment I'm just playing around with what I'm doing. I'm actually submitting my stuff to games and movies and TV shows, so this is why you hear a variation of maybe 1 to 2 minutes tracks if you go onto my SoundCloud. So that's what I do, and I've got a good response from the people I submit to, so I'm happy with that. There is like Damon and other producers here on Twitch for different styles of music. So if you're into R&B, you're into rap and stuff like that, I can certainly pass you on to these other guys. That's not a problem. I think they know me enough to accept something. If I pass something on to them, then they'll ever listen to it. I don't know what they charge, so that would be a different thing. But yeah, we will do maybe a Saturday, Sunday stream where we do a listening thing and whatever, submission, and I'll sort that out eventually. Bruno, my dog loves my guitar. He always cuddles up to my guitar, don't you? Don't you, puppy? Yeah, so anyway, this is what I'm working on. This is called In My Head. Hey, be careful, little shit. I think I will. Did I release this or not? I can't remember. Let me have a listen.
Lord, I don't care if it rains all day. It's gonna take my troubles away.
Okay, I can hear needs a lot of work. I'm just going through what I've been working on, so So, this is what I do. I just go through everything, and all bits and bobs I come up with, I have a listen to and then go back to it later on. That's what I'm doing today. I'm just looking through, finding new stuff. It might lead me into another track, another song, or whatever else. So we've got a loop. What I need to do here is go here, because this is Cakewalk by Banlab. Okay, so that gives me an idea of the chords I'm using. So I'm using A minor and A. Okay, so I know what I've got, and that is basically a loop with drum beats and whatever else. I know where I'm going there. Okay. I wanted to see that for now. We don't know where I'm going. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I could say sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, okay. Like I say, there's certain things will work, won't do. Okay. Right. Just a minute, I need to find out where I am.
Gotta have a reason to love somebody. Yeah, yeah, baby. Hold her close and tell her that you need her. Never deceive her. Yeah, just a little confusion, just to help me through the day, just to take away the pain. Wanna know why something so beautiful made me feel this way, but still this way. Gotta have a reason to love somebody. Yeah, yeah, baby. Hold her close and tell her that you need her. Never deceive her. More than a year and a day since the last saw your face. Guess it's better today. Now I'm a million miles away. Guess I found my sacred place. Oh yeah, the place where I can hide away. Oh yeah, yeah, just a place where I can hide my face. Gotta have a reason to love somebody. Yeah, yeah, baby. Hold her close and tell her that you need her. Never deceive her. Yeah, just a little confusion, just to help me through the day, just to take away the pain. Wanna know why something so beautiful made me feel this way, but still this way. You gotta have a reason to love somebody. Yeah, yeah, baby. You gotta have a reason to love somebody. Yeah, yeah, baby. But you'll never get to them heights when the city's sleeping. That's the time my heart is beating. Where the new generation gonna take control. Don't you know it's set in stone? You can build your cities to the skies, but you'll never get to them heights if you believe in what they're teaching. Then you'll never get it right. When the city's sleeping, that's the time my heart is beating. Where the new generation gonna take control. Don't you know it's set in stone? We're the new generation. Gonna take control. Don't you know it's set in stone? When the city's sleeping, that's the time my heart is beating. We're the new generation. Gonna take control. Don't you know it's set in stone? You may be just a face in the crowd, but deep down you're family. Don't you know the blood runs so deep down to the heart of me? Don't you know you're part of me? The world will keep on turning round. The first light that I see, woman, don't you know this is all we'll ever need? Sleep tight.
We've all become God's madmen. All of us.
Here's Johnny.
I know someone's out there.
Okay, enough of that. I'm just trying to find different things to do. I do, wait a minute. I need to hear my own audio. That is just for myself. You probably can hear me, but sometimes when I'm doing this, I can't hear myself. At the end of the day, it's your own personal thing, music and whatever. I can bring up like this stuff here and show you some websites I'm looking at the moment on how to promote your music and stuff like that. We're going to get into that later on. At the moment, I'm just getting used to the software, how we use it. I mean, the tabs I've got set up, but you'll see things, you'll see me making mistakes and whatever. I might even fall asleep while I'm doing it some nights, because I do other things as well as just doing music, and sometimes I just come on and say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and unfortunately I have maybe 1-2 beers and I fall asleep, and it happens. That's real life. I mean, I'm not a robot. It's like today, I'm sat here, traffic's running, I'm having a beer. I must say to everybody out there, it may be your birthday, and if so, happy birthday. I am going to build this up as much as I can and make it more professional and stuff. At the moment, I'm just playing with it, so bear with me. Follow the stream. It'd be nice if you could support me by, well, I don't know, maybe $5 or something. There's things I want to do which would need donations. Now, I mean, if you're going to submit your track, it's going to be like $5 to $10. You want me to do ever listen to your track and work on your track, then that's going to be more and stuff like that. I'll work on that later on, but at the moment, it's more about doing things live and showing people what I do and taking them to the next level. I think that sounds about right, is basically just doing that and showing them where I am, where I'm going, and stuff like that. I don't know. Like I say, I'm just playing with the thing. You either support me, you either follow me, or you don't. I mean, basically, I've been on Twitch for maybe 4 years now, and I've not been affiliated or anything like that. So I'm not really bothered. I just do my own thing, and that's it. I set up the banner and things like that. I should have done years ago, but I have things to do, you know. Be it my music and whatever else, I've got to promote my own stuff. I've got to record my own stuff, as you can see here. And I do shit like this, yeah. And this is shit. When I come back to it and I listen to it, I go, what the fuck was that all about? I'll build it, or I'll listen to it and build it up and take it to the next level, but that's what we do. As musicians, you have to find, basically you have to find you have to find your own sound. Like you see me doing this stuff and whatever else. Some of you don't even know how to do what I'm doing. I mean, so, and I'm working in Cakewalk, which is free. It's a free software. I produce my songs and whatever else on Cakewalk by Banlad. And that's it. I mean, And I pass my songs on to certain producers and whatever else for music. Just give me a second, check. See, I've done it again. I'm bad for this. I am very bad for this. I don't put the chords in and structure. This is what this piece here is for. I should put the chords and structure in here, which I haven't done. So anyway, I want to listen to it. 1510 would be obviously 1510, the month. Snippets. These little things is like for games, intros for movies or whatever else. You know, you have to do these things. If you can't take it any further, you put it in a loop and you say to yourself, wait a minute. That's what you do. My little puppy doggy. Come here. Good boy. My neighbour's upset with my dog at the moment. Oh, should I say our dog? Hey Bruno. Hey Bruno. Hey Bruno. Hey Bruno. He's just playing my guitar as normal. Like I say, these little bits I come up with. Someday later on, I already know what's going to happen, so I don't really have to force myself into anything because I know it's already coming. But what you doing, puppy? Hey! Hey, puppy! Hey! Hey, puppy! Bruno! Bruno! What's up? Hey? What do you do? Right. So this is the kind of stuff I do. I make up sounds and whatever else, and then I submit them to certain places. I have said about Spotify playlists and stuff like that. We're going to work on that later. So if you've got tracks and whatever else, I have to sort out a gene type thing for playlists, which I will do. I'm working on it. There's a lot of guys. I did piss off a lot of guys on SoundCloud. Sorry guys. But to be honest, when I'm reviewing songs, it's my personal view. It's my personal sound. It's what I want to hear in the track. If I don't hear the vocals, then I'll put it shit. Honestly, I will say it. I'm just getting some more mints. So if you if you're here, hello, fuck off. So if I'm here and I'm doing my stream, whatever else, and you've submitted a track, it's the worst thing you can do, because if it's muddy and you say, your email says to me, listen to my track, I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem. Cost you €5 for me to listen to it, or €10, depending on what site you're on. So I listen to your track, and I go, okay. And you want a personal review, I give you a personal review. And I will say what I feel. Because if you've got your best friend there doing a mix for you, his mix is in his head, doing whatever he does. I mean, no downfall, no nothing, I don't care. But I know what I want from a mix. And so do a lot of people doing reviews and whatever else. They'll say the same thing. I mean, SoundCloud is okay. I like SoundCloud. You can find a lot of my material on SoundCloud. But if you just, I mean, I can remember watching Damien and he's saying, oh yeah, SoundCloud, yeah, I understand. Basically, SoundCloud will give you what you want. It's as easy as that. SoundCloud is there just to play your tracks. Hello, I'm Nash Drift. This is my new track. Thank you very much. Okay. So, sorry, I'm just making a cigarette. I don't smoke traditional cigarettes. I make my own. So if you've not got any, as I say, no fade in, no fade out, and the volumes and stuff like that, then that causes a problem, because it starts like really loud and people are going, yeah, okay, yeah, this is alright, yeah, cool man, yeah. And then the volume drops or it goes up and it blasts people's ears out. Or on the last part you haven't got a fade out and it just stops. I mean, it's just like, let's say, if I loop, let's have a look. Say if I loop the first section here on this track. So this is my song, which is 4, right, which is not very long. That's my song. That's my structure. That's my song, and this is how it starts. That's good, but you want to fade in. You want to fade into that shit. If that's the sound, that's the volume and whatever else, what you want is here, right, is, what would I say, if I go like this, right, there we go, a volume. We'll have a volume here, and we'll do the same here. Let's have a look, see if we can find it. Is that, no, I can't do it on that. I can do it this way though. So we're going to do a volume to that stretch, okay. My drums here, which is going to be the same. So we do another line. So we want him to come in. We want him to come in, right? We don't want to blow people's fucking heads off. So we want him to come in, and then we want a level. That's your level here. Your volume has to come in slightly, okay? That's your ramp. That's your ramp. This is your volume coming in, okay? So we're coming in, right? We don't want to blow people's fucking ears off as soon as we start, right? We want a casual build up to where we're going, yeah? Then we blast the fucking ears off later on. Right, I think that's a bit too high, but we're going to leave it at that for now, give you a scope. Same with this one, okay? So we do the same here. Remember, this is on Cakewalk, so it's just giving you an idea. Right, so our scope, we have to come up to level here. So we've got a drone coming in, and we have to do this for every single fucking track. I know it's a pain in the arse, but being a fucking producer of your sound, okay, you have to get it right. Right, listen to this. It's not going to jump in at you, it's going to gradually jump in at you, right? Remember, I've just done this. I'm not going to save it because I've still got a lot of work to do on this. Right, so I still need to work on these tracks, so I'll do the same here on every single track. You've worked on this, right? You've done this, right? We're going to the same level, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to turn these off, right? We're going to turn them all off. So we can move on and we can see which tracks we haven't fucking sorted out. Because this comes annoying to people. Right, we've done this one. Right, let's have a look. Yeah, he's done. Right, so we want to go on this one. Okay. So we're going to your next track. So he's going to be fucking mega fucking volume. So what we're doing is we're coming up to that volume here. Come here. Twat. Right. So you mark the volumes. It's scope you have to do. That's alright. So we leave him where he is. Your first track's here. Okay? Right. You have to take him to that. You need to involve it, to take it to that level. Otherwise, it's just like, what the fuck is going on here? Right, so we take him down there. We don't want him full fucking blast. We want him coming slowly. Okay? Right, it's gonna sound shit. Right, I know that, but you've seen what I've just done. Right, so we've done that on each track. This is Cakewalk. I don't know what software you use. Right, so I've done that. I've got scope coming in. Okay, this is only for this section. So here. I'm saying. It's not coming in like from here.
Lord, I don't care if it rains all day.
Right, so basically, doesn't matter where you start in the fucking track, the song, whatever else. If you find out your loop section is here, right, it could be this part here, which I've just looped earlier, right. It could be your first vocal section. You set like this here. Right, so if I do that and I'll loop that. What I'm saying is, it's a build up. It's not like so fucking sudden like you get on SoundCloud, because what happens is they record the stuff they're doing like I'm doing now, but they don't think about the intro, the build up. Yeah, the build up is, I would say, I would build it up to about here. That's what I would do. If it's too heavy, then I would build it up, probably, 2.5, 3. I would say that would be my build up. That would be my level. I'm moving up to 3. Give them something what's coming, okay? Level it out after that and continue, right? And same as you're going out. You want to drift out. You want to drift out. You want to drift in. Hence, Nash drift. Okay? You want to drift in. You want to drift out. And that's it. Okay? You give them a build up. Bam. Give them the level. Boom, 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 boom. End scenario. Oof. Take them back down. That's it. Simple as. Right. Anyway, it's enough. I'm just going through some of the stuff I'm working on. What else we got? Killer numbers. Now, most of you who follow me know this track. It's getting big hits at the moment. We're doing pretty well with Cold Chills. Mainly because the pandemic and whatever else. But same thing, listen. Now, do you understand what I'm saying? Too much fucking volume to begin with. Right, so what you've got to do here, I don't think this one is released yet. Cold Week, no, I don't think so. What I'm looking for at the moment is just making sure tracks or what. So I'm not doing much to get like today because I'm just messing around. We're gonna, I don't know about beat battles and stuff like that, because the guys I know, we don't actually do beat battles. That is more for hip hop and stuff like that. I would say email me suggestions of what you would like on the stream. Do I show you the best sites to promote your music? Do I say fuck it and start my own record label? I don't know. Maybe it's an option. Because the music industry is not the way it used to be. And I'm being honest. I could go through SoundCloud and find some perfect rock songs, hip hop, perfect songs, which I would say I like and promote. But there is certain things you can do, there's certain things you can't do in the music thing. So you have to try and get your little niche, is what I'm doing here. Get people to join me, and we're working it from there. What's up, Bob? I think he needs to go for a walk. Yeah, so I have a list of websites I'm going to post soon to help some of you guys out, and maybe if we get enough people subscribing to Twitch and whatever else, we can take it a little bit further. It's my dog playing my guitar, as always. And we'll take it to the next level, I think. Get enough subscribers and whatever else. We don't know. Might never happen. But right, enough of this. I'm gonna put some music on, and let me see.